Hey everyone, it's Stephanie again, and you are tuned into the review of Married at First Sight, Season 10, Episode 7. Thank you guys so much for waiting for me this week. We had a crazy busy week, and we had ultrasounds for baby Lee, and so that's where my focus was, to be honest. So he's perfect. I thank you guys once again for all the continuing congratulations and the gifts that are coming in. You guys are so sweet. We really appreciate it. We're so grateful for you all. So let's get into this week's review. So this week we see them come into the part where they move in together. Once again, they have them in this complex. I'm thinking that they're just contracted with whatever complex that they have, and it's just easier to have them all at one place. If you guys have been watching the show from the beginning, you'll notice that that stuff has really changed. It felt a little more organic back in the day because it felt like, okay, they were having a discussion about where they should live and why they should live there and kind of making that space their own. I think if you remember season maybe 6 or 7, the one with Tristan and Mia, where Tristan kicked her out, I think that was like the catalyst to offer this space for them to be able to have a neutral new space where they really don't have to think about it, do the whole where are we gonna live and checking out each other's places to see the best fit. And having them all in one location so that it's easier for the experts to get to them and also for them to have their group experiences, since they seem to be very big on that. I think it's so cookie cutter. It makes sense in certain ways, but in other ways I don't really love it, but I get why they do it. So they all get to move in together this week. Let's just kick it off with one of the couples that did not move in together, Mindy and Zach. So they come back from the honeymoon. They go to their separate places. Mindy actually continues with the process. She's completely committed to the process, and she moves into the apartment alone because Zach is not ready to. Here's the thing with Zach. Like I said the last couple of weeks, I just don't see him committed to Mindy. I see him committed to the show because he doesn't want to look like this bad guy. I don't inherently think that he's a bad guy. I think that he's struggling because he doesn't really find the attraction or the desire to want to be with her, which means that he is struggling to get to know her. I don't think he's open like Pastor Cal. So basically Pastor Cal this episode meets with all of the couples, and Pastor Cal asks him, are you committed to this marriage? And you know, they do the long dramatic pause, and he says yes, but I think he says yes reluctantly because I don't think he's really committed. I think he just doesn't want to look like the bad guy, and I think that he doesn't want to fail. But there's two ways of being open to just seeing where the process goes, or being open to seeing where the process goes, but also the opportunity to be attracted to or become attracted to and build a real bond with the person that you're with, who you're initially not attracted to. Door number 1 is where Zach is at, and I don't think he's gonna go anywhere else. I don't think that Zach is even open to the possibility of, you know what, this just might surprise me. So I think that he is wasting time. You know, we see Pastor Cal meet with Mindy and him separately at first. And, you know, Zach throws her a bone when he meets with them together. But I think it's all fabricated. I think it's all superficial. I just think he's trying to be nice. But he can't, for whatever reason, just cut the cord right now and just say, okay, this is not something that I want, and I don't want to drag her through this. You know, maybe it could change. I hope that these couples that I don't have high faith in right now surprise me, because I'm a hopeless romantic, and I love love, and so I get excited when I see it work out, but based on what I'm seeing is just kind of like why I'm saying what I'm saying. But we see Pastor Cal talk to him and, you know, ask him the question and really get lost in the sauce like we all have been every time we hear Zach talk. Zach talks in circles and he never gets anywhere. And it's funny because if you notice, when Pastor Cal gets annoyed, he takes off his glasses and he like really takes a deep breath. It's so funny. I'm like, the moment those glasses come off, I'm sure he's saying several unholy words in his head that he cannot say out loud, because he can see right through it. But he's doing his job as one of the experts to offer the opportunity to let them know that you don't have to stick around, but also to coach them in being open to the fact that things may turn out differently. And I just don't believe that Zach is open to that. So I see more trouble lying ahead, but you know, they're still in it for now. If anything, they may get a great friendship. I mean, by some miracle, they might go somewhere else. But based on what we're seeing now, I don't have super high hopes for Zach and Mindy. You know, as we can see, their starting out has been so rocky, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better. It seems to be more hesitation and apprehension, especially on his end. And then it's going to make her super insecure, even more insecure, and it's just not really fair situation. So that is Zach and Mindy. Next, we have Michael and Mika. So Michael and Mika move in together as well. We see them and they all see each other's places this episode, where they get to see how each other's living and what their space looks like, and they take things from their home to bring to the neutral space to personalize it and give it more of a home feel. Michael and Mika move in together. You can tell that Mika, she's a little judgy. I mean, no surprise there. She's like nitpicking what he's doing, and he's the opposite. So it's funny for them to like have that engagement. What I thought was important with Michael and Mika and interesting was their interaction with Pastor Cal. So Pastor Cal kind of takes their temperature. You know, how are things going since the things on the honeymoon? They seem to be in a better space, but we still have this issue of what was said on the plane that we don't have any footage of. And, you know, Mika says this and Michael says that. And here's my issue with that whole situation. Michael never really says exactly what he said. Like, in my mind, based on what I'm seeing, he has a variation of what he says and what happens, but he never really says, this is what I said. And so that comes up again, and she brings up the fact that she can't trust him. She's struggling to trust him. And that is a source of contention for their relationship, and that's really tough at the beginning of a relationship. It's very hard to build anything significant when you're starting out not trusting that person. So we're still playing word games where he dances around it and says something and then says, well, I said expectation, or, you know, he even discusses some level of intimacy that was a little muddy for me because I didn't quite get what he was saying. I think Michael is really, really conscious about his experience, and he generally is a good guy and wants to do well. We see Michael have somewhat of a breakdown where he starts crying because he is overwhelmed by feeling like he's failing. And, you know, I think Mika handled it pretty well, where she turned to him. Her body language was interested in what he was saying, paying attention and asking, you know, what's wrong, trying to be supportive in that time frame. And he talked about, you know, being feeling like a failure and really wanting to do better and not fail. Here's where I think Michael is struggling and needs to cut himself some slack. So he's a principal. If you guys have heard, he worked in a school, but within a couple of weeks, he mentioned it on the honeymoon, he got a promotion. So now he's a principal. He is very aware of the way that he presents. And I think Michael is not only concerned about failing in the marriage, but failing for all these people who are watching, including his students and his colleagues and family. So we have all these components. You're failing your wife, you're failing yourself, you're failing your family, you're failing your students, you're failing your colleagues, you're failing the world. He's carrying all this weight, which is triggering these emotions. And if he just gave himself a little more grace and took some things off the table, then he would be aware of focusing on just his marriage, and there would be less pressure. Because I think he's like in his head a lot. And really the most important people, as long as you show yourself in a respectful manner, because if you work in a school, you should be doing that if you put yourself on TV. But as long as you present yourself in a respectful manner, you don't owe your marriage to these kids. You don't owe your marriage to these colleagues. He really needs to focus on his wife and himself and the marriage, so that it's not about failing so much, because I think it's like, I have to do well, I have to do well. So there's a lack of connection there for him because he's very cerebral about it, and there's a lot of pressure and I'm not doing well. And so that type of pressure will only push you away more. For the both of them, I feel like, you know, and Mika can be tough. We talked about that last week. She was, you know, she can be tough. She could be a little tight, you know what I'm saying? And so she needs to loosen up and give him space. But the both of them, for the sake of their marriage, need to come to a form of an agreement that what was said, okay? Now, whether you agree with it or not, or feel like you said some other way, like if somebody needs to step up to the plate, I would say Michael, and say, listen, this is what was said, this is not what I meant, or this is how I meant it. And have like a full, authentic conversation about it. And she can say, listen, this is what I heard. Well, she's already said it. This is how it made me feel. But when you're in a marriage, there are things that are going to come up. There are things that are going to make you upset. There are things that are just going to suck or be disrespectful or whatever. But if you choose to move on in a marriage, you guys have to have a conversation, address it, put it to bed. Like if it keeps coming back up, especially at the beginning, if it keeps coming back up, then you're like in quicksand the whole time. You're just going to be trying to stay afloat. They need to come to an agreement that let's address this situation once and for all, and then we move beyond that. So there's space for another disagreement that is not now adding a brick to this past disagreement. Or there's space to really just start anew. They're early enough where they can start off fresh and still build something really, really great. So that's Michael and Mika. They have work to do, but I like at the end when she said, you know, I think she was offering not only herself the reassurance, but she was offering Michael reassurance as well, saying, you know, we've struggled, you know, but I don't think that we're in a bad space. I don't think that we're failing. And I think that was nice for her to say, because I think that she knew he needed to hear that. Especially from her, because she would be the one to say this is a failure. And that's what he's kind of basing it off of, her words and her experience and how he's viewing that and so on and so forth. So that is Michael and Mika. We will see. You know, I don't get sparks from them. I don't get crazy chemistry, but there's room to grow there, and they possibly can get there if they're both on the same page about going there. So that is Michael and Mika. Next we have Katie and Derek. So Katie and Derek, once again, they're getting along pretty well. Here's the thing. If you remember last week when Katie had said something on the honeymoon about like wanting to take a shower by herself and her being kind of overwhelmed because she needed her own space, even though that, you know, on the surface it's kind of like, ooh, I just need a little me time. This has been a lot. For me, what I said last week was that she gives me like self-sabotage vibes because, and you know, I didn't trust Katie at the beginning. It took me a long time to get around to, you know, liking Katie because of her issues with her ex that was so close to getting married and kind of making this knee-jerk reaction. And really just, I think the only reason why she was like, whatever, ex, was because she found Derek to be so attractive. But all of that angst did not set up to be really open and successful in a new marriage. And so that circles back. The ex is back, where you know, she and Derek, they move in together, they have a good time, but their significant portion in this episode is them meeting with Pastor Cal. And Pastor Cal talking about, I forgot what he brought up, to be, you know, preggo brain. So to be honest, I forgot what he brought up. But it comes up that Katie is kind of still, you know, mourning the ex. And so of course Derek hearing that is like, Derek is saying, listen, I don't want to compete with an ex. Like, I'm here, I'm present, I'm whole, I'm wanting to be with you. I'm not going to compete with this other guy. And Katie is still struggling with that. And she says, you know, from the moment that he basically came back in the picture or tried to come back in the picture to getting married, there was really very, very little time. And so she is struggling with that transition because she really didn't put that to bed. For me, you shouldn't have even done this experiment. Like, in my mind, the way that comes off is, okay, I can't have who I want. I'm sick of this. Let me just sign up for this and hope it works out. Oh, they chose me. Wow. Let me just roll with it. And then it's kind of like, well, I know that this guy has not been able to show and prove. So last minute, let me just give this other guy a chance and hope, like, just, it's literally like jumping off a building with your eyes closed. Luckily, she landed on something soft, you know, but it didn't have as much thought and integrity as I would have hoped. And I feel like Derek deserves. And so Derek is feeling a way about that, understandably so, because I'm with you. And here you are still mourning your ex who really couldn't even commit to you or really didn't even demonstrate his love for you until 5 minutes ago. And for me, that's a red flag, because is he demonstrating this now that he knows that you're about to go somewhere else? So is it a scare tactic? Oh, well, come back to me. Let me give you this little nibble, which is a little bit more than I've been giving you, so you feel like I'm changing, but I'm not. And she's self-sabotaging in letting that get in the way. A small part of me understands her needs to put that to bed, but like I said, she should have already done that. Where I have issue with Derek is the fact that Derek kind of puts a time frame on falling in love. They talk about how Derek mentioned that it felt like roommates. And so I think they're lacking like intimacy and really getting to know each other. And there's stuff there. So we're seeing, oh, Derek and Katie, they look so great together. But there's some real stuff there that is in the way of them building a foundation. But Derek, in his immaturity, because he's never been in love, puts a time frame on it. And it just sounds so inexperienced, which he is. A lot of us, when you haven't been in love, or when you were younger, think back to that, you know, a lot of us have said, well, you can't be in love so quick, or there isn't love at first sight, or, you know, it takes at least a year to get to know, you know, you put all these parameters on what you think something is, and then you grow up and you fall in love and you have experience and you learn by experience and by witnessing others, and you realize there's no time frame for that. There's a time frame for you. I don't even think that's 6 months to a year, which is what he says. I don't think I could fall in love for 6 months to a year. So now she's triggered because she was like, okay, this is 8 weeks, so we don't have 6 months to a year. He doesn't even understand that that's the parameter that he has for himself, because he thinks that's how long it has to take. So I hope that he can get over that, because if he's like holding the hand of this time frame, he can't hold her hand. He can't connect with her because he's committed to this thing. So even if it feels right, well, it can't be this. I might really, really like her, or you might love her. You have to like open yourself up to that. So though I think Pastor Cal is doing a great job, I would have pushed to have that dialogue, but I love how he explains, you know, falling in love and how love is really a commitment. You know, it's not something you just fall into and, oh, I don't know what happened. Like, because true love is a decision that you continue to make, even when you don't like that person. That is love. You know, there's no euphoric, you can feel yourself falling for someone, sure, but there's like not December 18th, I knew I loved. Even if you said it December 18th, you've been loving that person. That's when you decided to really face the music with yourself and maybe that individual. So I hope that that doesn't get in the way of the two of them, because they have great potential. They're one of the 2 couples right now of the 5 who I believe in. So I hope that they can work through their stuff. So that's Katie and Derek. Next we have Jessica and Austin. So Jessica and Austin, easy peasy right now. They're having a good time. They moved in together. It was funny watching him go to her place because he's such a minimalist and she likes a lot of things. I mean, hello, surprise. That's like me and my husband. She likes a lot of things. She wants all her stuff. It was funny, like when they were going back and forth about the watermelon, and she runs back and she takes the watermelon. I think they'll be fine. You know, they'll have little hiccups, because moving in together, you'll have hiccups because it's 2 whole people who've had these entire lives of only really having to be bothered with themselves, and now it's with 2 people. Nothing stuck out to me much with Jessica and Austin. If it did, please comment and let me know, because I don't remember it. But Jessica and Austin, to me, continue to be the strongest couple. They seem to be on the very same page. They seem to be authentically matched and just enjoying each other. And I think with relationships, sometimes society or bad dysfunctional history conditions us to believe that relationships have to be dramatic. So it's like, oh, they're boring. You want your relationship to be boring in some ways. You want a little chutzpah, but you want your relationship to be very like even keel. The up and down is not cute, you know? I mean, there will be ups and downs because life throws curveballs, but you don't necessarily want all the drama. So I'm glad that Jessica and Austin don't have much going on. I'm glad I don't remember if they do have something going on, because it wasn't really that significant. But we'll watch and wait with Jessica and Austin, because I think that they are the best couple right now. They're the greatest couple. Last but not least, we have Taylor and Brandon. Oh, Lord. Taylor and Brandon. So Brandon, okay. So Taylor and Brandon are at odds, as we saw at the last episode. They're at odds. You know, they didn't come back together from the honeymoon. He had that big explosion. Listen, a lot of people understand kind of like my perspective on Brandon. Some people I see are kind of giving Brandon a pass, and I think that that's like part of the problem. I think Brandon has probably gotten too many passes. You know, pacifying kids too much creates adults who act the same way, except there isn't much room for the same shenanigans. You know, we can't say, oh, he's only 6 or he's only whatever. Despite his attitude, or despite what may happen, despite what may be triggering him, despite his panic attacks, there are plenty of people who have panic attacks who don't demonstrate it in that way. And there's no one way, but we can't use panic attacks as the reason to justify bad behavior, because his behavior lasts far beyond the actual panic attack. And yes, there are residual symptoms, but it's not necessarily emotional abuse of anybody. And there's less patience just for adult men in the country. You know, I mean, if we think about just the way the society is designed, you know, him stumping around like this is not really indicative of a great man in a marriage. So I don't want to give Brandon any passes. His behavior is unacceptable, and Taylor doesn't have to deal with that, and she doesn't have to make allowances for him if it hurts her, especially so detrimentally early on. So we see them come back separately, and Pastor Cal is meeting with her to talk about what's going on, and here Brandon comes in so nonchalant. I mean, walks in with the flowers like a true abuser would. It really made me sick, to be honest, because if you're gonna come back in with the energy of wanting to get to it and the energy of recognizing that your behavior was beyond inappropriate, and like come back in a little less like lively, a little less comical, almost like it wasn't that big of a deal. Once again, I don't know if it's the cameras, because he's hyper aware of the cameras, and he didn't really want to get into it, but his affect is so nonchalant, even sitting with, you know, Pastor Cal and talking about these things, and, you know, making excuses for not knowing the best way to do stuff. You know that's unacceptable. And this didn't happen just once on the honeymoon. This happened twice, where he shut down initially because of the camera thing, and once again had this big explosion where he treated everyone like crap and was inappropriate with his wife. And he walks in all nonchalantly with flowers after ignoring her for like 2 days. Unacceptable. Unacceptable. He is not ready to be married, because this will continue to happen. He's not ready to even be in a relationship. He really needs to focus on himself. I'm going to keep saying it. And it's not about being team Brandon. It's about being team Taylor. It's about team healthy relationships. And you can't be unhealthy and be a healthy member of a healthy relationship. And you will just continue to pour toxic vibes into the person that you're with and the relationship as well. Pastor Cal felt a way about it. We knew, because he took them glasses off. But to me, they had a conversation, and you see Taylor move ahead. You still see her a little shell-shocked, a little emotionally depleted, uncomfortable now, because she doesn't know what's going to set her husband off, and just kind of like scared, like, I don't want to give up on the marriage. I think Taylor does not want to give up on the marriage and the whole idea of what it could be, but I don't believe that Taylor's really even sold on Brandon. I think that she's dated all these guys in the past. It didn't work out. She did this experiment. She's married. And there's aspects of him that she has experienced that are great. And so she's like, man, I really like that type of guy. But to me, if there's more of this Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde Brandon coming out than it is the nice Brandon consistently over time, then maybe that nice Brandon is not really Brandon most of the time. Maybe that is a front. And I don't like the design of even the conversation, because once again, like I said with the last issue with Brandon, they discussed it, but there was not a plan moving forward. So by plan, I mean, let's have a conversation about this. What triggers you? How have you dealt with your triggers in the past? How can I be of help to you when you're having these triggers? What do you need? When you get upset, what are you willing to do now? You have to be intentional. Because we act off of autopilot, but when we're intentional, we can start to make those changes over time, and then now that can become your new normal. How much time do you need if you need space? What are you like committed to not do? If you do this, what are the consequences? Like, it might sound very like childlike, but it's really, first of all, if you act like a child, I mean, if the shoe fits, That's one. But two, in relationships, you need boundaries and you need rules of engagement. It's okay to have rules of engagement with arguing and things like that within a marriage, because you won't know that you crossed the line if you haven't drawn it. And so what happens is, if you guys set boundaries, then when you cross them, which should be few and far between, because now you're aware of them, you will be aware enough to start to create a space where you don't cross them. Or if you see yourself going to that line, you can pull yourself back. But if there are no boundaries, then anything goes, and that will kill a marriage. It'll kill the emotional connection. It'll kill the desire to be with someone, and then things fall apart very quickly after that. So I'm not seeing the follow-up. I'm not seeing the real accountability and responsibility put on Brandon. Like, it's not just, this is what I've done and I'm sorry, because it just felt so, it felt like typical type, like, storybook abuser, coming in with the flowers, kind of cleaning it all up, being charming, only to do it again. Because we've seen him do it twice. We saw him do it on the honeymoon twice, and now we're starting out living together in a home together. I wouldn't be comfortable if I was that girl. And we're talking about an 8-week experiment. If this has happened twice in 8 weeks, and I've known you for 2 weeks, like, that percentage is not really in favor of a strong, long-lasting, beautiful, healthy, happy marriage. So that's it for that's it for Taylor and Brandon. I just want to see people treated well, man or woman. So that's it. Let me know what you guys thought. As always, don't forget to subscribe, comment, and like, and I will see you next week. Everyone have a great weekend.